as you know, we are nearing the final vote tally. President-elect Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump in the 2020 presidential election, actually quite decisively. The numbers show Biden with state leads that are not going to be overcome by recounts, certainly not in 5 different states he flipped. Biden is likely to end up with 306 electoral votes. But from the perspective of popular legitimacy, what did the American people say on Tuesday? He is probably going to win by 4 points. He's up by 4.5 million votes, with millions more to come in from states like California and New York. He might end up winning by 6 or 7 million votes. Now, there have been numerous drawn-out, narrow elections in American history, starting with the election of 1800 and the 2000 election. It's been talked about over and over for the past week. Back in 1876, the election was so close, it was decided by Congress. This is not one of those elections. Hear me loud and clear. That's not what we're dealing with right now. What we are dealing with is one of the 2 major parties refusing to accept a Democratic Party victory as legitimate. And the message has been sent from Trump and Trump TV on down for months now. The only way Democrats could win would be by cheating. And so now we are faced with this extremely dangerous and unnerving, bizarre middle space where the best that can be said is that Trump, the Republican Party, and their allies would try to overthrow the democratically elected government and steal the election if it were closer, if they could figure out the right way to do it. But it's just not close enough for them to do it this time. Some Republicans are acting like Trump's behavior is a big joke. One senior Republican official told the Washington Post, quote, "What is the downside for humoring him for this little bit of time? No one seriously thinks the results will change. He went golfing this weekend. It's not like he's plotting how to prevent Joe Biden from taking power on January 20th. He's tweeting about filing some lawsuits. Those lawsuits will fail. Then he'll tweet some more about how the election was stolen, and then he'll leave." I mean, that's probably true. And yet, earlier today, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had, of all things, the inauguration of the Center for Freedom and Democracy at the Ronald Reagan Institute. From the podium the State Department loves to use to lecture other countries about accepting the results of elections, did this.
Is the State Department currently preparing to engage with the Biden transition team? And if not, at what point does a delay hamper a smooth transition or pose a risk to national security?
There will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. All right, we're ready.
Is that a joke? It's a bad joke. Or maybe it's not a joke. I don't know. Well, leaders from around the world who understand who won are congratulating President-elect Biden. Trump and the Republican Party to continue to do things like file an insanely frivolous lawsuit in Pennsylvania that wants to retroactively invalidate all mail-in votes in Pennsylvania. For real. It's the actual suit they're filing. Georgia's entire Republican delegation, all of the elected office holders in Congress, sent a letter to the Republican Secretary of State in Georgia, who they are mad didn't oversee an election that stopped Democrats from voting, and they allege serious allegations of voting irregularities with no evidence whatsoever. And those voting irregularities somehow only impacted the Republican candidates who did not win outright. Now, keep in mind, this includes a bunch of people who were just reelected, that letter. They're saying their elections were fine and legitimate, but the other races where Democrats did better are illegitimate. So far, only 4 Republican senators have congratulated President-elect Biden on his victory, retiring Senator Pat Toomey, Pennsylvania, just moments ago, saying that he thinks that Biden's going to win. You have the General Services Administration, an arm of the federal government, refusing to fork over the money necessary for office space to begin the transition. The Washington Post reports the White House has told federal agencies to plan for the Trump administration's budget proposal for next year. You have Attorney General Bill Barr setting up an interestingly worded but really quite disquieting note about the Department of Justice stepping into an election before results are certified to look into voter fraud. That led to the resignation of the director of the Election Crimes Branch, who was a decorated Justice Department veteran. And then perhaps most worryingly, a day after firing Defense Secretary Mark Esper, Trump has moved a series of loyalists into critical positions throughout the Pentagon. As NBC News political editor Benji Sarlin pointed out, the emerging argument of, yes, the president and his allies want to overturn the results of an election and would do so in a heartbeat if at all possible, but it's not like they actually can, is not exactly very reassuring for the future of democracy. At a certain point, if you're just trollingly pretending to be engaged in a coup, when do you cross over to actually trying for a coup? Speaking at a press conference this afternoon, President-elect Biden dismissed the Republican attempts to delegitimize the election.
The ability for the administration in any way by failure to recognize our win does not change the dynamic at all in what we're able to do. I just think it's an embarrassment, quite frankly. The only thing that, how can I say this tactfully? I think it will not help the president's legacy.
It's not going to work. And they're not winning. They are losing badly and flailing. But what they are doing is wildly destructive and nihilistic even. It's no surprise we've ended up here, or that so much of the Republican Party, all of it, and I mean like the whole conservative architecture and all the lawyers of these law firms like Jones Day that are participating in it, and all the staffers, all the people that are part of this enterprise are going along with it. I mean, it has been a core belief of the conservative movement and many in the Republican Party for literally more than a decade that there just is no such thing as legitimate democratic rule by the Democratic Party. They can't legitimately win. I mean, let's remember, the reason Donald Trump became a national figure in conservative politics was his elevation of a deranged conspiracy theory that the last Democratic president, who won a resounding victory, was actually secretly illegitimate. And everyone from Mitt Romney to Fox News played along because they didn't want to upset the people in the base. Let them have this.